Well, here we go today on the Powerful Communication podcast from Comsteria. A media trainer, that's me, analyses the performance of the guests on BBC Question Time. The episode in question was last night, 21st of May. It was from Dumfries. And on the panel was Scotland Office Minister Kirsty McNeill, Labour, Stephen Flynn from the SNP, the Conservatives Harriet Cross, Thomas Kerr from Reform UK, and co-leader of the Scottish Greens, Greer. A few quick thoughts. Main one is that Labour and the Conservatives strike me as speaking from a place of bitterness. They still come across in these debate-type situations as though they're like the big two, and they still think they are the big two. And they can't quite understand why they're not there. And I'm speaking obviously from a Scottish perspective. Clearly Labour are in government across the UK, but they just had a pasting in the local elections and in the Scottish Parliament elections. So, and I don't think they've really taken the lesson from that yet. Labour need to speak from a place, a more humble place. They need to be the underdog. They need to show that they've learned those lessons and changed, and they don't come across like that. Certainly Kirsty McNeill, when she was on Question Time last night, I just felt you don't get it. You're still wondering why the world's not the way it was, why the Labour Party's not held in the esteem it used to be. Same applies for the Conservative MP, Harriet Cross. Every time she spoke, and I'm not really concerned with what they were saying, I'm looking at how these people come across on the panel, the tone, the style of the communication, how as a viewer I perceive them. And the feeling that I got from Harriet Cross was, why doesn't the rest of the world see things the same way I do? I'm supposed to be the default. We're the norm. We're right. Everyone else hasn't got it yet. Why can't you bloody see it? Now, she didn't say it like that, but that's how she made me feel when I was watching this. It was like these two sort of establishment figures with the world changing all around them, and you can see it just eating them up. Like they don't get it. They seem tormented by this. Stephen Flynn, whatever you think of the guy and whatever you think of his politics, the guy's a winner, right? Now, not because he's amazingly good, and we'll get onto that in a second, but he's an absolute winner, and he understands his audience. He comes across very well, not quite as well as he thinks, and this is Stephen Flynn's undoing. Time and time again on that programme last night, and he was in a fortunate position. He's in a pretty successful position in terms of his politics at the moment. He was also sitting right in the middle, which is a nice position to be in when you're round that sort of half-oval shaped table. But time and time again, what Stephen Flynn will do is he'll say something absolutely excellent. He'll say something quite brilliant, but he doesn't stop. He keeps going. And if you let him go a little bit longer, it's like he runs into a brick wall, and he'll end up saying something stupid or saying something that can easily get picked apart or that starts to turn the audience back round against him. And he's got this gift where he can pick something up and run with it and make it sound quite plausible and quite good, and you get on side with him. But then he keeps going and you think, you've just undone everything that you just said. And then he'll pick something up and he'll run with that. I think the lesson for Stephen Flynn is you don't need to try as hard as you are. You're already a lot better than these other people on panels like this. Say a little bit less, be a little more humble. And I don't know Stephen Flynn and I don't know what his plans are, but my advice to him would be, don't go steaming in trying to become the leader of the SNP and the First Minister. I'm sure he's quite an ambitious guy. He's more than capable. But recognise that you do have some flaws. Take that little bit longer. Actually, John Swinney's doing very well at the moment. He has his limitations, no question, but he's quite likeable. It takes time to bed in, and my advice to Stephen Flynn would be, you get there. I don't think there's any question about him getting there, but just take your time and work on some of these flaws, say a little bit less, and don't undo some of that good work that you're doing. And then when I'm watching these debate programmes, I always sort of ask myself, who out of all the people on the panel would I most see myself sort of sitting having a chat with? Who do I think could persuade me to change my mind about something political? And who do I think that might be receptive to listening to me and learning from me? And the only person on that panel last night that I felt that about, or who I felt the most about, was Ross Greer. And I was quite surprised because it wasn't that long ago that I would kind of join in some of the discussions and people saying like, who's this guy, this kid, straight out of the modern studies class telling us how to run the world. And I need to be honest, I don't feel that way about him anymore. He's matured. I think he has softened some of the slightly rough edges. He doesn't come across as needy. He feels, and I guess that the Greens' time in the sort of Butte House agreement, regardless of how it ended, he's clearly benefited from that. I guess maybe he has achieved some of the things that he was keen to achieve. He maybe feels he belongs there now. He just struck me as pragmatic and sensible and on the side of the audience. And I thought he came across really well. I imagine if you take the politics away, who out of that panel could I see just still doing it, still standing up to people in power? And I think Ross Greer absolutely does that. He doesn't say things that can't be substantiated. Now, he's in a fortunate position. He's not running a government, so maybe he doesn't need to. But his line about, yes, a cap on food prices would be difficult, but we should be doing difficult things. It's difficult, but it's not as difficult as being 8 years old and going to school hungry. Whoa, that's a really good statement, isn't it? And none of us can argue with that. He's right. How we do it, I'm sorry, Stephen, but that's your problem, pal. It's for you to figure out. And maybe for the Labour government to figure out as well. But this idea that there's a guy like Ross Greer that's just kind of standing up to people in power, but doing it in a sensible, controlled way, rather than being like some kind of raving activist that's just anti-everything, I thought was pretty smart. The other thing I can see now with the Scottish Greens is that I think there's a lot of people that, like them, look at the sort of maybe more extreme policies and think, well, it's okay because it'll never happen anyway, because the UK civil service will never allow it. The Westminster government will never allow it. So it's quite all right. We can bring in these Scottish Green voices, but we know that they're constrained anyway. And I think this is why the Greens and the SNP are picking up votes, is because even people that don't agree with everything they stand for just think, well, it's never going to happen anyway. It doesn't matter. So bring them in, do your thing. That's all fine. The rest of you are rubbish. Bring these guys in, and we've got that sort of stopgap of the UK establishment, civil service, whatever lords, whatever we think of it. You're not going to do half the stuff that you talk about anyway, so come on, that's all fine. And then that brings me to Thomas Kerr from Reform UK. And I think with him is what I would say is he doesn't have a problem saying things that people might think are unpleasant. I think he's comfortable sharing, I guess, the uncomfortable truth. And so, or what he sees as the uncomfortable truth. And so what you get there is you get a certain amount of support where people go, well, I don't like these guys, I don't agree with them, but at least they give it to me straight. And there's always going to be support, I think, in any of these situations, while you see, Kirsty and Stephen sort of squirming around and maybe changing their mind, or the parties change their minds. Reform UK seem to be maybe a wee bit more straightforward, a blunter, I suppose, less concerned about being liked, and maybe to a degree have nothing to lose. And I think that's quite an interesting position to be in. And again, I think there's probably people who don't agree with much of what Reform stands for, but will vote for them anyway. And I think it's not as simple as saying it's some sort of protest vote. I think it's a considered calculated vote or calculated support from a lot of people. It's not just a throwaway protest vote that I don't like everybody else, so I'll just vote for these guys. I think it is actually, well, no, we quite like that attitude and that voice to be part of things, but the more extreme things they stand for, well, they'll never happen anyway, because number one, the establishment will stop them, and number two, politicians never do what they say anyway. And I think that's where we're at, and it's actually quite an interesting place. My advice to Labour and the Conservative now is you're not the big dogs anymore. You're at the bottom. You need to start at the bottom. You need to start and think like a startup. You need to be humble. You need to let go of how the world used to be. You're in a whole new reality now. You've not been cheated out of this. You lost fair and square time and time and time again. So swallow all of that and go back to the beginning. And there's nothing went wrong with the world. I think that's how they often come across, is they think, what's gone wrong with the world that I'm sitting here and everybody seems to prefer Stephen Flynn, and why is the SNP doing so well these days, and why are reform overtaking us? That's not that something went wrong with the world. That's the world. So get on board with it and get better and stop being bitter.